What is it about us modern humans that makes us enjoy being scared? I mean, I know it sounds pretty counterintuitive, but there's gotta be a reason why horror media exists, right? Is it a laugh in the face of our ancestors having to deal with real things that go bump in the night? Or is it maybe akin to people eating spicy foods? Some folks just enjoy the torment. Well, I don't have the answers to those questions right now, but it is officially fall, and you know what that means? It's time to get spooky, baby. Each year, around this time, I have two traditions when it comes to my media consumption. One is to watch Over the Garden Wall, and if you want some more autumnal vibes, you should go check out my video on it. And two is to watch as many new horror movies as I can. There's just something about the smell in the air when we get past the autumnal equinox that makes me want to pop in a horror flick. I love them all. Slashers, ghost stories, schlocky 50s creature features, modern psychological horrors, and the list goes on. But there is one thing that makes a movie stand out to me. More so than any great special effects or the most absolutely terrifying scares. To me, creativity is the defining mark of a great horror film. There has to be something different enough about the movie to make it stand out to me. A film could do this in any number of ways. For example, here are three of my favorite horror films. 2010's Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, 1977's House, or Houseu if you're insufferable, and 2011's Cabin in the Woods. While I want to make videos on all three of these films, in short, Tucker and Dale takes the perspective of a horror movie and flips it on its head. House is a ghost film with the most insane fever dream plot and visuals in any horror film. And Cabin in the Woods is a meta-commentary on the staleness of horror cinema around that time. All three of these movies have left their mark on my taste with their own brand of storytelling and creativity. And each year, as we approach October, I go into my yearly binge of horror, hoping to find another movie to add to that pantheon of horror greats. Well, this year, the first movie I watched managed to firmly insert itself straight into that pantheon. This movie is called Dave Made a Maze. Created in 2017 by Bill Watterson, no, not that Bill Watterson. And it follows the titular Dave, who doesn't appear in the movie for about half of its brisk 80-minute runtime. In summation, Dave is a quote-unquote creative, or at least fancies himself as one. And over one manic weekend, Dave decides to build a maze in his living room, completely out of cardboard. The horror comes from the fact that, while the dimensions of this maze in the living room are barely big enough to fit a full-grown adult, once inside, the maze has taken on a life of its own, growing almost like a living creature. The plot follows Dave's girlfriend Annie, his best friend Gordon, three other friends, Bryn, Greg, and Jane, as well as a documentary crew who gets wrapped up in the maze, in their search for Dave in the maze and eventual attempt to escape. As it turns out, I have a surprising amount of thoughts on a movie with a relatively simple concept such as this. So I don't want to waste any more time, and I just want to talk about it. So come with me and let's get lost in this maze. I think first things first, there is one specific thing that immediately jumps out about this movie, and that's the set design. When you look at horror movies, scares can come from anywhere. Jump scares, misdirection, slow builds, the list goes on. I happen to be in the camp that the setting, the mise-en-scène, and the mood of any horror movie are what makes a really effective scare work. Just imagine The Shining happening in a well-lit, regular suburban house. Sure, it might still be spooky, but to be a truly great horror film, it has to be the Overlook Hotel. And when it comes to mise-en-scène, Dave Made a Maze has that in spades. As briefly touched on, the titular maze that Dave made was created completely out of cardboard. What sticks with me the most is just the sheer amount of creativity and care that must have gone into building these sets from the production team. In an interview with GrimoireOfHorror.com, director Bill Watterson describes the creative process of making the sets with production designer Jeff White. I don't think we had many sets up for more than a day. The piano room was maybe half a day. It's great that you love that room. I know our production designer, Jeff White, was disappointed in how it turned out. He had ambitions to take it further and always felt that it was the one that got away. And that's how we were able to achieve such a high level under obscene constraints. Everyone wanted to bring every bit of themselves into the world that we were building. What this touches on is the level of detail that goes into all of these sets. Let's take the origami crane room with the Olmec looking face as an example. The cast stumbles into a room reminiscent of the trash compactor from A New Hope. But instead of discarded trash and refuse, they find a room filled with origami creations, a previous endeavor of Dave's, ornate wall decorations, and a massive operable cardboard face. The most insane part to me is the level of detail in the set of this scene. The room is flooded with these cranes, flowers, and pieces of tissue paper. All the while, a massive, flapping origami crane is harrowing the cast. During the attack, the cardboard face is moving of its own volition. It's flapping as well and exhaling smoke and debris, with the culmination of the scene being our heroes climbing through its operable mouth. Oh, and lest we forget, the walls are all covered in cardboard of varying shapes, sizes, and designs. There are just so many things going on in this one couple of minute scene that required, I'm sure, days and days of planning, creating props, blocking shots, and acting for one small bit of the movie that's never returned to again. And that's just this one scene. In the entirety of the 80-minute movie, there's almost no reuse of locations after they've been used once. And the new locations that the characters visit are all just as intriguing as the last. The Olmec room we just talked about is one of the first that they go into. The attention to detail while setting the scene for these bits of horror is just so engrossing for the average viewer. I was never once pulled out of the movie at any given point. I would spend entire scenes just looking around the room and finding new and interesting set decorations. And no, none of the sets are particularly quote-unquote scary, but they don't need to be when they're this engaging. So, if the sets aren't that scary, there has to be horror found somewhere in this horror movie, right? What I think makes Dave Made a Maze such a special horror movie is the fact that there's not much horror in the movie. While it has plenty of the trappings of the horror genre, it does its best to subvert them in many ways. One of the best examples is how it handles gore and deaths. Gore is a staple in many a horror movie, especially in the early to mid 2000s with gore-filled flicks like Hostel and the Saw series, forcing audiences to watch every single way that a human being could be dismembered or disemboweled on a yearly basis for a while there. And don't get me wrong, I like gore movies. Exaggerated movie deaths are half of why I'm here in this genre. But what Dave Made a Maze does so well is that even though people are beheaded, disemboweled, or otherwise maimed, there's no actual gore in the movie. Let's take a look at the death scene of Jane. Upon stepping on a trap that no one has triggered yet, Jane freezes there, obviously fearing for her life. The camera cuts down to an amazing shot of practical effects and machinery created out of cardboard. Then, in a classic horror movie shot, we get the delayed beheading. As the sharp object quickly flashes across the screen, a red line of blood appears across her neck, followed by her head falling off and comically spraying everyone in blood. At least that's what I thought. Upon closer inspection, you can see that the thin red blood of line across her neck is actually a ribbon, and the spray of blood is red confetti being shot out of her neck. And every single death in the movie is portrayed in this way. The crew tries their best to make you do a quick double take with every death, thinking that it's a spray of blood, but it's actually confetti or some other similar substance. This is genius to me. But even apart from the visual fun that it is, it also works so well thematically with the intrinsic childlike nature of a box fort. The horror feels almost elementary in a lot of ways. It feels like the stuff that kids in school would come up with, banging their action figures together. So much so that at times it becomes downright comical. While the plot may hedge towards serious and get a bit more dangerous near the end, the movie never really loses that sense of whimsy. But what does this do for the audience? Well, in my estimation, it keeps them off balance, never knowing whether to laugh at the horrifying cardboard woman who keeps asking for a high five, or to hide behind their pillows. With the deaths being portrayed as sprays of confetti rather than showers of blood, the audience can almost internalize the deaths as not really deaths, if that makes any sense. I almost never did a Friday style damn to the deaths. I often found myself chuckling at the early deaths. Only when it gets towards the end of the film, and events like the aforementioned cardboard woman and the stalking minotaur become more prevalent, that things get ostensibly a bit scarier. But even with some of the most creative depictions of death that I've ever seen in a movie, Dave Made a Maze still didn't really scare me. I did eventually find fear in this movie, however, and I think I found it in the place where all great movies hide it: subtext, metaphor, and theming. Our titular Dave is a lost individual. In a wonderfully animated sequence that starts the film, we can see Dave initially excited by his girlfriend leaving the house. He sprints over to a canvas and paints a pretty impressive eyeball, followed by a quick jingle on the keyboard which he makes a meager attempt to play and then gets angry, smashing the keyboard into a pile of origami cranes. Dave quickly gets aggravated by these cranes as well, spreading them across the room. Next, it cuts to Dave woodworking in his living room, obviously not knowing what he's doing. He almost kills himself with a renegade saw blade. And from then on, it's things like finish that concept album, take care of the ant farm, fix the doorknob, and eventually we see the spark of the idea for the cardboard maze in said ant farm. Not only is this opening sequence fantastically crafted and filled with fun foreshadowing for upcoming events, it's a peek into who Dave is and what he struggles with. In my estimation, and this may be projecting on my part, but we'll get to that in a second, Dave is an individual who considers himself to be a creative person. He is unemployed, and all he wants from the world is to make something that he can be proud of. So when his girlfriend goes out of town, he thinks he'll finally have the perfect time to sit down, be alone, and be as creative as he wants. But of course, that's never how it works, is it? This is something that I feel deep in my soul. Scattered around my life at any given point, you will find the discarded carcasses of some new creative endeavor. One that I was sure, given almost no actual effort on my part, that I would excel at, and it would become something that I could profit off of in my life, and that would make me genuinely happy. Drawing, music, photography, videography, writing, voiceover, the list goes on. And I think that it's part of the reason that I still make these video essays to this day. Partially because I really enjoy creating them and I love media criticism, but partially because it helps me feel at least somewhat more creatively stimulated. The reasons for these things not working out are numerous and varied. My greatest hits personally are if I only had more time and I didn't have the energy, but those are pretty weak excuses, honestly. This is where the actual terror of Dave Made a Maze comes in for me in particular. As the film progresses, it becomes clear that Dave has grown attached to this maze. This maze is the closest thing that Dave's ever come to completing in his life, and it's something that he can be proud of. But it becomes clear that in order to escape, the maze will have to be destroyed. Dave pushes back against this for the majority of the movie. Regardless of the people that he's hurt, or killed in this case, regardless of the danger that they are still in, Dave pushes back on destroying the maze. He's proud of it in his own messed up ways. And purely aesthetically and creatively, the maze is beautiful. He has every right to be proud of it on a face value. But soon it becomes clear that it's not necessarily the destruction of the maze that Dave fears, it's the completion. See, Dave was not only aggravated by his inability to get started on projects and immediately succeed at them, he, much like myself, was terrified of actually finishing projects. Because finishing a project means pushing it out into the world to be seen by others and judged. There's an inherent terror to pouring your heart and soul into something, and regardless of your own pride in its execution, showing it to others to judge. I see a lot of myself in Dave and his struggle here. I have a whole video about this in my Goodbye Area video, a video which I genuinely hate and I think it's the worst thing I've ever made, but I think the point of that whole video is you have to put the things you make out there even if you don't like them. Long story short, I have a really hard time showing off my personal creative endeavors. I have a short story that was published in a nationally available book, and I've told no one. This is why the subtext and metaphor of Dave Made a Maze was actually where I found the horror in the film. Nearing the end of the film, the world is seemingly closing in on everyone left still alive. The group realizes that in order to be free of the ever-expanding maze, Dave will actually have to finish the maze, and then subsequently kill it. Dave has to have the wherewithal to finally complete the most incredible thing that he has ever created, and before he can receive any sort of acclaim or accolade, he'll have to destroy it. The thought of this terrifies me. I liken this to a novel that I personally have been working off and on for like 5 years. Finally finishing that novel, loving it, being genuinely proud of it, and then looking at the screen and just holding down the delete button. And Dave does it. He manages to free most of his friends by destroying his dream and giving the audience the catharsis that a horror movie seems to require these days. It's a powerful message about killing your art at the expense of possibly your own happiness, but you grow from it as a person and you find consolation in the love of others that allow you to create better art further down the road. I love this movie. It was such a wonderful surprise on a day where I was staying home sick from work. And believe me, there's definitely way more going on in this movie than I've talked about here today. Apart from my textual readings commenting on the creativity process, I could see many different perspectives leading everyone to different readings of this movie. Just do yourself a favor. Watch this movie this spooky season. Like I said, it's only 80 minutes long, and it's a genuine joy from start to finish. And when you're done, come back here and talk to me about it in the comments. Thanks for watching, everybody. Spookily, your friend Spiral. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Dave Made a Maze is a super cool movie. I know this is probably a ramblier than usual video, but I like this movie a lot, and I just wanted to bang something out real quick for October to kind of get this out in a time-relevant manner, because I hope people want to watch this for October. Long story short, I'm going to try and make more videos, but hey, I always say that. But I am planning on streaming on either Twitch or YouTube more coming up. Finally got mostly everything set up the way I like it. I'm going to see if I can, bust out some streams, either the beginning, coming soon. I'll publish a schedule somewhere. I don't know where I'll publish it, but yeah. Thanks for watching, y'all. Subscribe and like and all that stuff if you feel like it. That'd be cool. Share it to your friends if you like the movie. Okay, love you, bye.